Hello and welcome to another episode of She Leads Now. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon, and today I am bringing you another installment of our series, Cultivating Financial Confidence in Women. Today I have another powerful guest with me, Rose Vitale. Rose, aka the Female Angel Investor, is the founder of the Female Founders Pitch Summit and host of Female Investor Podcast. With more than 15 years of experience as an investor, Rose is passionate about improving the landscape of funding for women-owned businesses. With that, welcome to the show, Rose.
Thank you. I appreciate having me. I know we've, meant to schedule this. It's hard to get on your books here. You're months out. You're popular.
So excited to have you here and have this conversation. From our first connection and learning more about your work and what you do, I just knew that I had to have you on the show to share, not just, your journey, of course, but also what can we start to do today to prepare and to shift our mindsets as women, women in business, women professionals, to heal our relationship with money, to, learn how to grow our money and certainly be able to make the impact that we want to. So before we get into all that, I would love for you to share your journey and how you even got into this space.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So my journey, I think, stems when I first moved to California in 2006. I came out here with just a suitcase, and I always joke around, I'm a girl from 10 Mile Road. So many people know that Eminem's from 8 Mile Road. I'm from 10, and that's a true story. So I think I always had it within me to want to be successful in terms of not only business and this whole, I guess, ecosystem now, what we call, money and capitalism and venture and private equity. And so my journey began when I got into wireless. So we come from telecommunications. We were one of the largest partners for Cricket Wireless before we sold to AT&T in 2013, and then went off to essentially help T-Mobile with Metro PCS, which was Cricket's competitor. And we were brought on board to essentially take 50% market share from Cricket Wireless. And so it was a long journey with wireless. And I always joke around, if you can make it in wireless, you can make it anywhere.
That is awesome. So even before that, right? From a career perspective and deciding what you wanted your career to be, like what were some of the influences and what led you to make that decision that you wanted to come into this space?
Well, I think from a young age, I was always wanted to be an entrepreneur. When I was really young, I remember 7, 8 years old, I'd sit my parents down and ask them why they weren't business owners. And so I think it was always within me, right? And kind of navigating that when I was young and not really having any mentors to really help understand that. And I remember my grandma once told me, and I was about 10 years old, she goes, "You're an entrepreneur," because I had a little pencil business. I would double my money and sell pencils in school, right? And go and get these pencils for a quarter, and you'd get two of them. And then I would sell it for a quarter each. So I would double my money. And so my grandma first called me an entrepreneur, and I didn't even know what that word meant. I was like, I don't know what that word means, let alone spell it, right? And so I think it's always been within me. I think, I look at, when people get into business, it's often like, you hear like musicians that say that it was always within them to either play the piano or sing, or you look at these artists who are just incredibly talented. And I think it's the same way about business, right? I think that was always within me. And so along the way, I had to navigate what does that look like, and made all of the mistakes. And so with that being said, I just tried to learn from my mistakes. Sometimes I made them twice. I tried to just be really good at you know navigating what that really looks like.
Yeah, yeah. And so was it at some point, did you go through the traditional like corporate route and then get to a place and you were like, this isn't for me, or did you just like jump straight into entrepreneurship?
No, I never went to the corporate route. I always just kind of wanted to be a business owner. You know, my mom used to always say, "Rosie, you're so smart. Why don't you go to school?" And I was just like, "Well, it's not that I don't believe in education. It's just, my type of learning and the way I learn is just by doing.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty hands-on, and so that was just always within me, right? In terms of just wanting to be an entrepreneur, and so I think that for me, it was just always something I really wanted to do. And it's a struggle, right? I'm young, I have no mentors, no money. And how do you become an entrepreneur, right? And so that's kind of what I did, just step by step. But I met really great people. I have a great founder who, I always joke around. I always saying, she was the first person that ever believed in me because she did it with not only action and words, but she was right alongside of me, writing and having that journey. Because I always say, when you're an entrepreneur, you can have your best day and your worst day all in one day.
Sometimes in the same hour, girl. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, I've
true.
definitely had that. Definitely in the same hour.
Yeah,
One
yeah,
email comes through, and all of a sudden, all that joy and excitement you had just goes away.
yeah,
So thank you so much for sharing your journey and your powerful story here. And so let's fast forward to the amazing work that you're doing today with DRA, Family Office, and the summit and everything else. So talk to us a little bit about what work looks like for you today.
yeah. Great question. Great question. Well, when I first got into wireless, we were in the prepaid wireless space, and prepaid in the US was not popular, right? We had less than 3% market share. Most people in the US are postpaid, AT&T, Verizon have contracts. So I saw an amazing opportunity. And when in 2008 happened and the crash happened and people were losing their homes and their jobs, it was a great opportunity for us to be in prepaid because that was my best year ever. So I quickly learned that no matter what economy is, it is, there's always opportunity to make money, right? And so I think that you just have to find those industries and those niches. And so when I look today at what is happening with female founders and how they're getting less than 2% of the venture funding, I saw that there's an enormous opportunity, but a problem as well, right? And I think that until we address it at the fundamental issues, nothing is ever going to change. And I kind of devised a strategy in terms of how do we really capture this opportunity in market share, right? Because I kind of coined the phrase that women are the new asset class. So it's our job to define what those assets are and in what industries, right? And so I think that when I look at my strategy in terms of how do we really penetrate this market, I always refer back to my second piece of the puzzle is that women really have to learn how to stick together. I think that men do a really good job, especially in the asset allocation sector of finances. Is that they're out having golf with their friends and they're doing all of this stuff and they're referring their friends and it's kind of like a buddy system, right? They don't if they get mad at each other, they get over it, right? As opposed to how women handle business and capital raising. You piss a woman off and you no longer talk with her, right? I think we've all had that. So I think that my second strategy and how I'm looking at this, as an opportunity to really kind of change the flow of capital is that women really do need to stick together. We're going to have bad days. We're going to get mad at each other. We're going to sometimes lose money. Things are going to happen. But ultimately, if we could use our greatest power is each other, then the flow of capital will change. But as of right now, it's going backwards.
Mm. All right, so much you said there, right? And so, especially now, right? It sounds like in 2008, 2009, that recession, right? You were able to capitalize on something. We're now here in 2023 and facing, a similar situation. And I just recently did a workshop for a group of people, and I kept reiterating that, like, don't get so caught up in the media's like fear mongering around, like, oh my gosh, it's a recession, like we're all going to lose money, like, And I had to learn that maybe a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. I remember someone telling me that the money doesn't go away, Sabine. It, in a recession or anything like that, it doesn't go away. It doesn't go into hiding. And I remember like the light bulb clicked for me. I was just like, you're right. But mainstream everything that we hear and experience and see on LinkedIn and everywhere else, it's just like, oh, the money's gone, which is why, your life has completely shifted. So, the fact that we could look back now and look at, companies like Lyft and Uber and the gig economy that didn't even exist, but out of necessity, right? And
Yeah.
ingenuity, they now exist. And so how do we get more people, women in particular, to understand that recession is part of a system or a financial cycle, that it's not, that it doesn't necessarily have to be the end all and the be all of their opportunity.
Yeah. Great question. When I look at, industries or economies and opportunities, I always say that every industry has a wave, right? And when you're looking at things, you never can predict the top of a wave, and you certainly don't want to be at a bottom of a wave, right? And so if you can get somewhere in between, you're going to do okay. And then to your point, in terms of what the media pumps out and what's happening, I always feel that there's opportunity in the good economies and better opportunities in the bad economies, right? And so you have to look for those type of industries where you can make profits, right? And so I think that you have to focus on that, and if you get really good at that, as long as you're not over leveraged in terms of debt, you're going to do okay, right? I think that goes back to anything, when you look at interest rates that are rising and you look at all of the things that are happening in the economy that, says that we're supposedly in a recession or going into a recession. It ultimately comes down to, I mean, can you still afford your lifestyle? And can you, I mean, is there certain aspects of your lifestyle that, may need to change, right? And so, as long as I always go back to like basics of that, as long as you're, well capitalized, you limit your debt exposure, you're going to be okay and you can ride it out. And people who have the capital to do things in these so-called down economies are, I think, where most people make money.
Yeah, yeah. And something else that you said earlier too is around, women's stick to itiveness with each
Yeah,
other. I was actually just having a conversation with another female entrepreneur, and she brought it up before I even told her I was doing this series. And she was just like,
yeah,
I feel like there needs to be a change in the way that we communicate with each other and what we communicate with each other, especially as women entrepreneurs, right? We get together and it's about how are the kids, how's the dog, how's the business, how's this, but there's never really much conversation about like, hey, how are you reinvesting, right? Like, what do your assets look like? We don't talk about money.
yeah,
Meanwhile, I'm part of this other group, right? It's all males, and that's all we talk about. Like, okay, well, where are you? Where do you want to be? How do you get there? And it's a
yeah,
completely different environment. And when I first stepped into that space, I felt very, very awkward on so many
yeah,
different levels. They're all six white males, right?
yeah,
And me.
yeah,
So all of my insecurity, all of my baggage, all of my stuff, right, was coming to the surface. But every month I would push myself, like, you need to be in the room. You need
yeah,
to be in the room. Let go of whatever baggage you have in your mind right now. You need to be in the room because you're learning as you're going through this process. Now we know not all of us do that, right? Not all of us necessarily force ourselves to be in the room because it's uncomfortable. And so
mhm,
based on what you've seen with the founders that you now support and you work with, and even the ones who like have started and maybe fizzled out, where are you seeing women getting in their way besides, the emotional aspects of the relationship building?
yeah. That's a really, really great question. I think for me, like I said, based on where I sit in the ecosystem, is that I see that women and where they get in their own way is, you know, maybe not necessarily the emotional aspect of how they navigate relationships, but I think it's also, the doubt that I see that women, put on themselves. I see women who have amazing careers and they have degrees, and they have just such a wonderful track record, and I'm blown away by some of the insecurities that I see in women, right? As opposed to guys, they don't have, any degree and any experience, but they're selling it to us like they do. And I just find that, for myself that, when I truly say I want to, support and change the flow of capital to women, because I think that we, as the economy has shown that women do return better rates of return, not only in business but as fund managers, right? If you're allocating capital to, let's say, fund managers, right? They tend to give you a 40% better return, just because they think about things differently. They process things differently. And so I think that, to your point, I too have, been in a room where it's mostly guys, but it doesn't make me feel uncomfortable because, essentially, I kind of feel like I'm one of them, right? And so when I think about this, and when I was leading that roundtable discussion about women being in the family office space, um, it's really unique because I had both men and women, 50% men, 50% women, show up at this roundtable meeting about, like, where they sit in the ecosystem, and what does that look like for them. And a very interesting lady who was she was born in India. She now lives in New York. She brought up something very, very interesting at this roundtable meeting. She said, Rose, it's different, based on where you sit in the ecosystem, right? Are you allocating capital, or are you requesting capital? Number one, or were you born into money, or all these things? Because the lens of what that looks like for a woman is very different if you're born into money or if you have money to allocate, as opposed to if you're on the other side of asking for capital.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so for the most part, we know that women, especially entrepreneurs, we're sitting on the side of asking, right? Or needing
Yeah,
to ask for the most part based on how things
yeah.
are. What are some of maybe like the mindset shifts or the activity or strategies that we can put in place so that it's we can shift over to the allocating side, or not, maybe not even needing to ask?
Yeah. That's a really good question. Um, and I think that the narrative will eventually change. Like we kind of spoke before the recording here, that within the next 20 years, that there's going to be a massive shift in terms of women coming into wealth, and what does that look like, and being prepared for that. Because if you're not, I've seen people in the family office space lose hundreds of millions of dollars, whether it be men or women, mostly men. But the thing is that, I think that, really having that component of educating yourself of what that looks like. How do you want to, I think that, how do you really want to leave your legacy piece? I think women tend to look at, when they come into wealth, what does that, legacy piece look like for them? And that's what motivates women, right? I think oftentimes when you see women who come into wealth, they're in the philanthropy side of things, right? They're in that, philanthropic, foundational type of thing. That's where they feel comfortable, right? But I think the real side of philanthropy is investing in women. And I think that when you ask most family members in the family office spaces, the number one question in the family office space is, how do we create generational wealth for years to come for our generation? The number one answer, and the only thing I really think, to answer that question, is when we invest in women, that we create an ecosystem, a new ecosystem, to where we create a ripple effect. Because I know that if I was to help you and elevate you and put you in a position of wealth, then you too will do that for others, right? And I think that my vision in terms of what I envisioned 3 years ago is, how do we create this ecosystem, right? How do we build the people around us to have the wealth, and then they too go out there and do the kinds of work that I'm doing? And then at some point, we will be in the position of power. We will be in the position of allocating capital. We will be in the position of taking back, what we should have in terms of how to elevate others and how to lift up others. And I think that is, I think, my legacy for me is that if I can change the flow of capital to double and triple these numbers, I think that we're gonna I always say we're gonna change history. And I think that that's what really kind of keeps me going. I faced a lot of adversity in regards to when I first came into this space. People didn't really like what I was doing because it messes up people's ecosystem of how they make money. And I really wanted to change things at a fundamental level. And if you're going to do that, you have to be disruptive, right? And in this ecosystem, the pay for play, allocating equity because people will introduce people, all these things that exist in this ecosystem today is what is prohibiting women to really get the capital they need to really scale their business. And so, really, addressing those issues on a fundamental level is what's going to help change this ecosystem. And until then, we're always going to be going backwards if we don't learn how to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, so many great nuggets there. Thank you. And so obviously the education piece is huge, right? I remember I was in a meeting or in a workshop with someone who had indicated she's had her business at the time, she had her business for years, right? And she got to a point where they had, cash flow issues and was trying to get capital during that
Yeah.
time, and it was really really hard. And she
Yeah.
shared that the biggest lesson that she learned in that process was it was okay where, it was no longer okay for her to have just enough, where it was that situation that made her realize that even if I don't need it right now, like I
Yeah.
should have the mindset of how am I building it so that if and when I do need it, it's available to me. And I think that
Yeah.
that's also part of, a mindset that we carry too, like, right? Like, okay, just enough, or, like I'm good, I'm steady here, right? Like I don't need millions or I don't need this. And what I hear you saying is don't look at it as just what you need, right? Or what you want in the moment, but look bigger and beyond that. Like, how does that create a ripple effect in the ecosystem, not just in you and your business and what you have going on or the lifestyle that you desire?
Yeah, absolutely. I loved what you just kind of touched upon. Most businesses fail not because of, well, management in some levels, but the biggest failure I see in business is just what you just said right there in regards to, obviously being in a cash flow situation. Most businesses fail because they're in a cash flow situation. And so I see that time and time again. That happens so often. It's not, mismanagement of, I mean, it could be mismanagement of funds. We've seen that as well. But I think that, the number one reason why businesses fail is because they're undercapitalized. And it's not because they may not have a great product, or they may not, for a variety of factors, that is the number one factor as far as a business failure.
Yeah, yeah. And so you tiptoed on this a little in the last response here. So, when we talked before, like you mentioned, you said in 20 years, right, there's going to be this wealth transfer. And so the work that you're doing right now is really to prepare as many female founders, as many business owners, as many people who want to, right, to be able to, especially women, to be able to be in the receiving end of that. So obviously there is education, right? Getting out there, learning the information, stepping into different environments, different networks, right? That allow you to gain access to people. Is there anything else that you believe would be helpful for women to start preparing, both mentally and how they're running their business and how they're running their lives to be in a space, and of course investing in more women, but to be in a space where when that transfer begins and starts to trickle in, we're on the receiving end and not the ones looking around like, wait, what's going on? Where is it?
Yeah. That's a great question. Really great question, because the majority of women, when they come into money, they will probably allocate it to wealth managers, right? And the wealth managers are often white men. And so I think that, that's not to say, we're biased, against men, or we're racist against, white men, because they have all the capital, right? Is that, educating themselves of what is really out there. I think that's the most important thing. And I was speaking to one of my board members several months ago, and she was talking to me about something, a secret that she said she found in working with us. And I said, "Yeah, what's that?" And she says, the real opportunity for wealth creation is in private equity, right? It's in private companies. It's not in the public markets. And so I really kind of took that to heart, and I really thought about what she said, because private markets are often only exclusively for the elite, right? For people who have the monies to invest into private markets. It's not like if you have $100 to invest, you're investing into a stock, and on and on and on. But I think that it's that education piece that women really have to know what's out there. And I think it starts from, what I see from my standpoint is that, knowing the terminologies. I think knowing what some of these words are. I mean, when I first got into this space, I didn't even know, debt versus equity, right? And it's a true story. I mean, in terms of, Barbara I think Corcoran from the Shark Tank called up a friend of mine's firm, and she didn't also know what debt versus equity before she went on to Shark Tank. So I think it's having those fundamental basic things of knowing the terminology, what are the difference, getting yourself educated, and then from there you can speak with confidence and know, if even if you're talking to your wealth manager, you know what he's talking about, and not just taking a backseat role and hoping that somebody's going to make you money, because when if they're going to make you money, they're also going to make themselves a lot of money.
Right, right. So many places to go there. I do want to have you speak to, because I know, your organization, you do so much, right? It's not just about the investments. You do a lot of education, you do a lot of support, bringing people together. So talk to us a little bit about, how you support women today, for those who are listening or watching, who are just like, "Oh my gosh, I need to have a conversation with her ASAP."
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, we run our family office. I'm not sure if your audience even knows what that terminology is, but basically, family offices, we don't outsource any of our capital. We manage it in house. We have a team of due diligence, legal, everything is done in house. We vet deals, we vet fund managers. Everything is kind of like a holistic approach to wealth management. And so, of course, you have to have, a certain net worth in order to really run a family office. We're a single family office, so we don't, use anybody else's capital other than our own. So, for me, it's very personal when I invest into somebody or a company. I really consider all aspects of how that is going to impact somebody's life, right? I always go back to the saying is I know what it was like to fight for one more day, and now we're in the position to help others fight for that next day, right? I know what it was like to meet payroll. I know what it was like to pay your vendors. I mean, I know what that was like, right? And then at the same time have to still serve your clients and customers. People can always reach out and submit their company for funding. We do have certain criterias. We don't, we're not the pre-seed or seed type of organization. We do like to see a track record where they have a proven revenue, and they have proven out their products or services. So for us as a family office, because we use our own capital to fund these founders, so we kind of look for things that we are comfortable with and things that we are experienced with. But ultimately, it's my vision, and I guess the impact of what I want my legacy to be is that if I was to be known for being the one to help change the flow of capital, I'd be very happy with that. And it's a long journey, long process. A lot of things have to happen, but it's been a ride, and I've had the fortunate opportunity to work with great people who also see that. that what we are creating is essentially a movement, right? And
Absolutely.
so I think that I'm most excited about that, and I'm so grateful that every day I get to work with people who, believe in the vision and the movement.
I love it. I love it. So I also for this audience of She Leads Now have individuals who are obviously founders, entrepreneurs, as well as professional women in traditional corporate environments. So is there anything that you can speak to in terms of if someone is like, oh my gosh, but I don't have a business, like I don't, but I want to learn this stuff and I want to get in the game somehow. What advice would you give that individual?
Yeah, my biggest advice is number 1, learn the terminology, learn it before you even do anything, right? I think that I see a lot of very, very successful women in the corporate world who do wanna back women, who do wanna support women, who, may not have millions of dollars, but they have a little nest egg for themselves, right? And they want to get involved. I think that, like I said, I go back to what I believe that women's greatest gift is to help support each other. I mean, you see women who are single moms, raising children, working a job, running her household, and she can't get the capital she needs. I mean, this is really my vision long term in terms of how we are going to change, like I said, this flow of capital. And women, we have to come together. We have to support each other. We can't belittle each other. We can't look down at somebody because they're not wearing the right clothes. We can't because they didn't do their hair today or whatever the case may be, right? I went into that women's private equity summit, and it was an incredible experience because it was 1,100 women in like senior level roles of, everybody from KKR to JP Morgan, everybody in the wealth management space. And, these women look incredibly like, I mean, they're spending where women are spending their money, right? You just look at a woman and she's got Hermes bag and she looks just amazing, right? And I pull up to the valet, and I knew what the environment was going to be, and I was asked to come because we were allocating capital, and I knew that people would be very corporate. And so I pull up to the valet and I'm wearing a Detroit versus everybody sweatshirt. And people are staring at me, looking me up and down, like wondering if I even belong there. And it was just interesting because I wanted to be a little disruptive because I knew everybody was going to be very corporate,
Yeah.
very just, I felt like the energy needed to change to more fun. When
Yeah.
we can learn how to have fun, relax with each other, and enjoy the process of learning from each other, we're gonna make some dents in this flow of capital, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah. I love that you shared that example and thank you for sharing that and thank you for your courage in doing that. And that also speaks to the fact that you've grown into a space where certain things don't define who you are, right? And obviously, it's not because you didn't have the money to be able to like dress in a suit and all that other stuff. I think part of the overall narrative, not to
Yeah.
necessarily keep us stuck, but the narrative to be like, well, if you just focus on looking pretty, then you're good, right? Versus like, no,
Or
focus
if
on
you have the
learning.
right handbag, or, I mean, I'll be the first to admit I like my nice stuff, right? And I I can't lie. I have very nice things. I've bought very nice things, but that doesn't define who I am and the impact I want to create. And I mean, I want to first thank you also by the work that you're doing and engaging people into this conversation. The one of the reasons why I created, the podcast, the Female Investor Podcast, is because I wanted to give women a platform to share their stories, right? And I think that you're doing the exact same work. And so thank you for what you do. And I'm sure you have a following that people that really love and have gotten to know who you are. And I think it's people like you that are going to help spread the message, spread the word, and get out there. And if we can care enough about each other to do those sorts of things, then this is going to be our greatest asset is each other.
Yeah, totally agree. And thank you. And thank you. And so want to go into the blitz section right real quick before we wrap
Yep.
up here. So I have three questions for you. So first
Yep.
one, and you've hinted to this a little bit, but If you could go back to a younger version of yourself and give
Mhm.
her a piece of advice based on what you know today, what might you tell her?
Wow, that's a good question. What would I tell her? Um, you know, I'd tell her that business is not easy. When I was young, I had, rose-colored glasses on what business looked like. It's not an easy journey. And so I think that what I would tell my younger self is it's okay. It's okay to sometimes fall down and you have to dust yourself off. And I think that's the same advice that I give to other women. It's okay. It's okay. Sometimes you got to slow down. Sometimes I go back to a saying that you know, said in businesses, sometimes you have to lose to win, and it's okay.
Yeah, facts, facts. And you shared a little bit of the legacy, right? Obviously, you are looking to change the game and change the flow of capital for women in particular. And so, as you think, years, decades from here, and you're looking back on your life, like what will be that proud moment for you, or that moment of achievement or accomplishment where you can be like, okay, you know what, I did it, I did good.
Yeah, love that question. When I think of that question, and when I look and see 20 years, 30 years down the line, um, and the impact that I'm gonna be a part of. I really think of all of the founders that we're gonna elevate and lift and the people's lives that we're gonna change. I always say that, what I'm doing is not only gonna change people on a financial level, but I think of, you know, one of the things that was my driving factor in terms of, success is that, my mom, very personal story, my mom who, suffered, abuse, when we were growing up and knowing that money had the power to change her situation. And so I think that I look at the impact of what we're going to do. We're gonna elevate people not only financially, but, I mean, we may help people out of situations of abuse, whether it be emotional, mental, physical, all types of, abuse. And that's what money can do. I think that money can have the power to change and elevate in so many different ways. And the impact of how women use their money, position, and power is, I think, when I look at it, that's what's going to, I think, bring me and our family office the greatest, success.
I love that. Love that. And then last question, because I believe leaders are readers, right? And clearly we talked about the importance of educating yourself. Is there a book or a couple of books that you would recommend that have either been a game changer for you, or that you would recommend for the audience to get them started in understanding and getting acclimated to this new terminology and this new way of being?
Yeah. It's a really old book called The Science of Getting Rich, right? And it's a really old book. I think it was written in 1927. But the fundamental principles of what that teaches somebody um, is critical to anybody's success. Whether they have money now or not, or whatever their current situation is. I think that that is such a really interesting deep, deep read in terms of when you really listen to the words of the science of getting rich, right? And whether people believe in the law of attraction or whatever the thing is, I think that is just such an interesting book in terms of you know how it helped me kind of clarify my legacy. And so that was, so I think, a pivotal point, listening to some of those words of the science of getting rich.
Yeah. Wallace Waddles, right? That's the author
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that one. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right,
Yeah,
cool.
and I think the biggest takeaway on that was, um, when you create value, whether it be for people around you, I mean, wealth is created when you create value, right? And so I think that most people, when they look at, how do they make money, how do they keep money, how all this stuff when it comes to talking about money is that the biggest thing that I took away from that science of getting rich is when you create massive value for somebody, money will always flow to you.
Yeah. That's such an important part. And I'm glad you pulled that out for the book because it goes along with Think and Grow Rich, right? When
Oh
he's
yeah.
or
Yeah.
no, I think maybe it's Zig Ziglar, one of his statements about like, the more problems that you solve or the bigger the problems that you solve for others, right? The more money you'll be able to create or be able to generate. And
Yeah, yeah, I
so
know that. I know what you're talking about. He says something like if you have enough help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want.
there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
And it sounds simplistic, right? And it obviously takes away a lot of the mystery around like how do I get money? How do I do it? But at the same time, there's so much even hidden in that people have to filter through their
Yeah.
own, beliefs and understanding that sometimes it takes a while. It's taken me a while.
Well, you know what? I think that, you're doing a really great job just based on, some of the things that you've shared with me. Showing up is the critical component, and then, taking what you've learned and then starting to implement that. So, I mean, I'm sure you have your reasons as to what your why is.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. There's several that I will not bore the audience with today, but you will hear it throughout this podcast. Well, Rose, thank you so much for coming on. You're such a wealth of knowledge. For those of you who are listening or who are watching, all of Rose's information will be listed in the show notes on the website as well as on all of the podcasting boards. I know that that's not the term, but that's what's coming to mind right now. Or all the players, excuse me, all of the players. So please be sure to connect with her, follow her. And so, to my understanding, obviously, we'll list the website. Is there any social platform that you hang out on the most that you would like the audience to connect with you on?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn in terms of professionally. I do drop feed, drop some, quick, like short, YouTube videos on things that I learned, the whole process of navigating, this whole, wealth scene. I always just to kind of give like 30, 60-second videos of little tips that I learn in terms of my process of, what we do on a daily basis.
Okay, awesome. So we will include LinkedIn, your YouTube, and of course your website. So again, thank you, Rose. I can't thank you enough for being on the show, for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and for those again, if you're listening, if you're watching, please don't just reach out, right? Ask the question. I think that that's a thing that I would want to help women break out of being afraid to just ask questions,
Yeah.
and without all that other negative chatter going on in the background. So with that, we will be back next week with another installment of the series. If you have questions or if you have comments or thoughts, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to answer those. Have a great rest of the day, and we will talk.